Hey everybody, today I am going to be reviewing Red Rocket. This film was directed by Sean Baker. The inception of this project, or at least the main character that it follows, began its early stages a long time ago when he was making a movie called Starlet, where he was kind of researching the porn industry. This idea of this guy who has been living in Los Angeles, making a living as a porn star, among other things, I'm sure, but he's coming back to Texas and begs to stay with his estranged wife and her mother for a bit. He has clearly been in some trouble and he really needs to regroup, so to speak. And out of that, slowly, the character of Mikey Saber comes to life. And I think that this particular protagonist is one of Sean Baker's tougher challenges as a movie subject in a while. A lot of Sean Baker characters are naturally very troubled. They tend to be very violent, wild, toxic people living on the outskirts of society to a degree, but there's always something about them that is redeemable, whether or not it has to do with a characteristic they have, or it's some part of the plot that is allowing them to be redeemed in some sort of form. When I look at a movie like Tangerine, it has kind of almost like a screwball type of energy to it. Very chaotic, very punchy, vibrant urban piece of filmmaking. Yet for all that drama and chaos, it is a very simple story about friendship and loyalty. And even when you look at a film like The Florida Project, which I actually find to be kind of more interesting in its design and structure, it's a tragic tale of a young woman who is far too young to be a mother. But despite that, the daughter brings out a lot of heart in the mother, and I think vice versa, just in a way that is maybe not typical, what you're used to, particularly in traditional films and such. So with the character of Mikey Saber, played by Simon Rex, we have an anti-hero whose prospects for attachment, for progress, for owning responsibility kind of become subverted as the film goes along. They begin to thin out. His prospects begin to thin out as the film progresses. And in the beginning, you have this assumption, naturally, that this person is down on their luck, so they're going to rebuild from here. But it really it becomes the opposite. And that's a difficult thing, I think, to capture. His motives for keeping his head above water become more and more shallow. And his prospects for a meaningful future become more and more scarce. And by the end of the film, I think he has no ties to anything that is meaningful, which is why I find this film in certain ways to be one of his more devastating that I've seen. Just not in like a deeply emotional, literal sense. Like I wasn't like bawling my eyes out watching the film or anything like that. What do we love Sean Baker for as an artist? We love him for his ability to show us a more, I don't want to say realistic, but just a more honest version of life that is lacking a lot of the judgment that is typically instilled in a lot of Hollywood films. And often he's telling stories about very rare people in very rare situations. It's a very Italian neorealist sort of sensibility. It's certainly an influence, I think, where we're really getting to see the underbelly of a society where a lot of the colorful characters are more populating the edges. And they're in the shadows, and we get to bring them forward now. And we get to see them as human beings, whether they are good people or morally repugnant. Often they are a mixture of the two. But yeah, I like that the lines are always very blurry in his films. The moments that typically tend to be in between in movies are what fill the center. It all kind of trickles right to the core here. And they inform the plot in more subtle ways. Oftentimes, the plot is hard to kind of sketch out as you're watching it. I think honestly, when you finish watching his films, then suddenly the mosaic comes together. And so when I look at this movie, it is another example of just great Sean Baker gutter poetry, as I like to say, because he's always able to find something really unique and cinematic and indelible about ordinary life. And really, a lot of what he's showing to me is anything but ordinary, but it just seems ordinary when we look at what is typically shown in pop culture. I love that Sean Baker just has a very much like the philosophy of, one man's trash. And I tend to agree with that. Most Italian neorealism that came out in the 1940s and in the 1950s, they have a very emotional and thematic simplicity. to the way that they're built, and they often have maybe a bit of darkness to them as well, but I tend to see it more as just like a natural melancholy of life. And I think that Red Rocket definitely has elements of that darkness, though it comes, I think, more from like 1970s cinema. But there's certainly the tragedy of the neorealism as well. To me, this is about the delusions of the American dream, or multiple American dreams that we have, and the lengths will go in order to fulfill them. And we watch people go to such extreme lengths. They'll humiliate themselves, sacrifice all dignity and humanity, and I think just witnessing that can be extremely painful in itself. The film has an unusual sort of pacing to it, and because of that, it's harder to ease into like an experience like Tangerine, which is just very much fun and entertaining. This film just oozes with sleaze, I think, more at its core, and yet I am still drawn to it at the same time. Just in the way that Sean Baker shoots his films, I find them to be really gorgeous in terms of look. There's just a pop to everything. There is a radiance and an openness and just a color that is very exciting, which really does contrast a lot of what's going on in the movies. It's contrasting this downward spiral that we're seeing our main character find himself in. And I can see the criticism of this character being, it's like, oh, he's so unlikable that there's nothing redeemable about him. So why should we follow him? Why should we follow somebody that is so reprehensible to the core? But to me, it's kind of an interesting thing, I don't think a character necessarily has to have a redeemable quality to them. And that's why it's a very interesting thing to me, because when I watch a movie, I don't necessarily have to like the main character at all, but I do have to be compelled by them. I do have to want to follow them. And I like that this film combines that sort of openness and that intrigue and that artistry with such an artificial tinge and bitterness to it. So it's a mixed experience as you're watching it, and there's a lot of discomfort that you feel, or at least I did, and yet that's all contradicted with humor and, again, disgust, pain. I don't see it as a glorification of our main character in any sort of way, so much as I find it more to be kind of an examination of what results from our attempts to glorify everything, because this is a character who is desperate to glorify for sure. But really, I think the key for this film and why it works so well is you've got a really great actor at the center that you want to follow. Simon Rex is absolutely fantastic in this. I never would have considered him. It's kind of a revelation. I wasn't sure about how I felt about him as I was watching the film. And again, I think that's key too. Always you're skeptical of this character. You're always keeping him at a distance. Like, don't come near me until I trust you, but you never trust him. I was one of those young millennials. I was probably like 12 or 13 when Scary Movie 3 came out, and I was very drawn to Simon Rex. I was drawn to his charm, and he was just a very likable guy, even in a movie like that. So that's, where I initially learned about him from. So it's clear that he has that charm and that likability just inherently as a personality. But there's also a sense of optimism, especially in his inflections and just the openness at which he delivers his dialogue. And in real life, Simon Rex has done all kinds of things in Hollywood, including porn early in his career, but you just get a sense from him, there's just an energy, we're gonna get this. He's a go-getter kind of guy, and maybe he's been a bit of a hustler as well. But I think the key here for this performance is that it's coming at the right time, because he is a bit older now than he used to be, so that handsomeness that he inherently has, and that frat boy energy that he has, it's almost like it's melting in the sun, like a candle. His skin is worn and leathery, and you can see, the skin loosening around his eyes and around his mouth. But no matter what, he just keeps that energy up as though not a day has passed. And two, even when he speaks, he has like an empty-headed shallowness to him that is very next door to like Bill and Ted. But we love Bill and Ted, so that's what I mean about the likability to him. We have to convincingly believe that this character can lure people into his world, and I think a lot of that has to do with he can stay so young, just in personality. It is that boyish charm that I mentioned, but also he has brilliant comedic timing, and it's clear in every single scene. I think a physical comedian in particular, it's clear that he likes to take risks, especially improvisational risks. And I like that when he returns home to his wife, his estranged wife, and her mother, rest in peace to the actress who died very recently, but I love the contrast between them. and him, because them, they're just sitting on the couch. They seem like shells of people letting all of the days just blend together. But at the same time, there is a strange sort of healthiness to them compared to him. There's a strange sort of, we accept reality, we accept life, we accept our circumstances, and there's more of an honesty and a dignity in it compared to him and how he is trying to get his shit together. You might admire the ambition and the notion to, escape your surroundings and go somewhere where things happen and all of that, but at the same time, when he comes back home, he can't function in his environment the way that the ladies can very easily. He's the one that needs them. It's not the other way around. He's the one who needs everybody in this film, not the other way around. So you always sense that the odds are against him, and they're going to continue to be against him as the film goes along. His estranged wife here doesn't have much of a backstory or anything. Really, none of them have much of a backstory, which I like. But she has a quality to her, like a defiance, that I'm really a fan of, especially in her dynamic with Simon. It feels more like hers is a deep-rooted natural strength, and all of his are surface impulses, just in the way that he approaches certain situations. But yes, I do see her as the aftermath of what it must be like to spend a lot of time in close proximity with a person like that. And then Strawberry over here, who is the underage seductress that works at the donut shop, she is the more innocent symbol. And the presence of Strawberry makes the film feel a lot more twisted, but it also causes it to really escalate in a certain direction. And this young lady, Suzanne Sun, I believe is her name, I think she's a born star. I think that she brings a very pert, very sensual, sort of femme fatale energy, but there's a softer, calmer energy naturally, a more feminine energy compared to, like this other character over here, Mikey, who is exhausting to experience. Very like cherry, freckled 1970s teen with kind of like that Technicolor pinup girl energy to her. And I think that she plays almost every moment with just like this beguiling tartness. And the character being a temptress by nature, like you're drawn to her, but from the beginning that she is bad news. But we really need to be drawn to her image because I think it really symbols everything. So just the way that she looks is very important. The way that all of these characters look is very important because it informs so much about the world. But I find myself very drawn to that final image in the film. And I'm not going to give it away too much, but it does involve her naturally. And I think it's just, it's a very dreamy, sort of devastating concept of, dangling the bright, sparkling object before the child. And that final moment could be, a turning point for the character. We really don't know. But to me, I see it as just kind of the final knife in the coffin of the story in terms of what we expect of a, hope for the character's future. He has always been lost from the beginning. And of course, she will find that out eventually, probably very quickly. But yeah, now he has dragged her into that lost identity sort of thing. So that adds another layer of darkness to it. But I just think it's a very ironic and special image because, the dreaminess here and the brightness of everything, the romanticism of the image, ironically feels more revealing than a lot of the more kind of serendipitous incidental moments. Sean Baker can bring out the artistic subtext in a way that never gets in the way of the realism of the story or the honesty of the story. And I think that's a really remarkable thing and a very invisible technique to be able to develop. And I just adore it. I absolutely recommend this film really to everybody, especially Sean Baker fans. I think there's a lot to admire here, but just film fans in general, see it. But that is my review. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm going to plug my website as always. It is deepfocuslens.com. I'm an artist and I do commission portraits and I also sell prints of my work. If that is something that you're interested in, you can always go to the website below. And if you have a question about a commission or a print, you can always email me. My email is in the description box below as well. Also, I want to give a shout out to my patrons and the new patrons that I have now. Thank you guys so much for your support. And if you are interested in supporting, the link for that is below, as well as the rest of my social media information. You can watch more videos here and you can subscribe if you'd like. Catch you next time.